Hi, I'm Susan, and I am a mom and a clinician. I work with brains all day long, and I'm here to talk to you guys a little bit about technology. So I know that Olathe is moving to a one-to-one initiative at some point in time. Y'all know the details by now, and I don't. I have huge issues with the amount of exposure that our kids are getting to technology, and I wanted to take a little bit of time to tell you about my concerns, because I really think that you're getting a whole lot of information about how great it is. And don't get me wrong, I think technology can certainly be fun. It can obviously be a boredom buster. It can get kids engaged in the coolness factor, but is it really helpful as far as the brain is concerned? So I think you're getting a whole bunch of information on the other side and not very much on this side. So all the information that I'm going to give to you is very research based. I've read a lot of books, I've read a lot of articles, a lot of scientific studies on the problems with the increased exposure with kids. And I know that you guys teach between young kids and adolescents, and there's a difference in how much technology I think is safe in those ages. A lot of really good experts, and honestly the people who make the technology themselves, don't advocate for almost any use of technology before the age of 12. And we are giving our toddlers iPads. So if you're working with little kids, there's really no brain-based reason to give them technology. Now I know that in life you're going to give them some, but it's not helpful. After the age of 12, one of the things that happens is that a lot of that creativity component that was being developed in the brain has now been developed or is a lot closer on its way. And so kids that get technology later on, it doesn't as much affect their creativity. So it's one of the big things when you do too much technology in younger kids, we find that there's less creativity in them. But as far as education goes, the more technology is in front of our kids, the more shallow their thinking is. If you're interested in books on this, there's a book called, it's by Nicholas Carr, and I think it's called Into the Shallows, What the Internet is Doing to Our Brains. It's very interesting. The more that we are looking at information on an iPad, on a laptop, on a phone, the more shallow our information is. So when it goes into our brains, in order to make a long-term memory, it has to get in focused attention into the hippocampus. Hippocampus has to do its stuff to actually make a memory. That takes focused attention. The problem with technology is even the fact that the iPad is constantly reloading and refreshing, to the brain it says that's novel information, that's new. So the brain is interpreting all of these signals instead of just looking at a page where they're getting one set of information. What happens with that is that the information goes to a pretty shallow level in the brain, and then let's be honest, there's a ton of distractions with technology. Your older kids are going to get instant messages all the stinking time. They're going to get text messages. So if you allow them to have their phones out, or if there's instant messaging on their iPads, which is a significant problem in the Shawnee Mission School District, I know, they are getting interrupted almost continually. So the research says that when your brain is interrupted like that, you're looking at a website, you're reading some information, and then you get an instant message. Kids think that they can multitask, but they cannot. We've done a ton of studies on this. It actually takes 20 to 25 minutes to get the brain circled back to the information that they were reading before the instant message came. And guess what? In those 25 minutes, they probably got 4 more messages. So our kids are getting constantly bombarded by messages, which means that long-term memories don't get a chance to even get formed. So what do you see? You see lower test scores. So the kids that are having more technology in their classrooms, kids that are getting distracted in their classrooms by things like this, their test scores go down significantly. They lose about 30% of what you teach them. But then the other obnoxious thing is that kids sitting around the kids who are getting distracted, let's say you have your one pain kid who's pulling up the wrong sites and he's not supposed to, or getting instant messages when they're not supposed to. And you have kids sitting on either side of that kid and behind that kid. Those kids are seeing that problem kid's screen. Their test scores actually go down even more. Probably they think because of the annoyance factor of that. He shouldn't even be on there, or he's getting so many instant messages. Why doesn't the teacher know this? This is really obnoxious. So they're impacted even more. So with attention and concentration, iPads are your enemy. Then we talk about the clinical piece, which is the emotional component. The more a kid is on a device, the more a part of the brain called the nucleus accumbens, which is the pleasure center of the brain, is getting these hits of dopamine. Dopamine feels good. It's your pleasure center. That's great. It's kind of like a bottomless barrel. You can never really get too much of it. It doesn't get to a place where it's like, oh, I'm full and done. It just keeps pumping. But after a while, the brain starts going, this is too much, and it starts building up a wall. What that actually leads to is a problem called anhedonia, which is a loss of pleasure. So when we get a kid in front of a screen for an hour to 2 hours, the brain doesn't differentiate between that and a line of cocaine or a hit of ecstasy. There isn't a difference. The more a kid is on a device, so let's say you have them on and you're not talking with your other team about how much is the math teacher doing? How much is the science teacher doing? How much is the English teacher doing in an iPad? So let's say they have 30 minutes in this class, 30 minutes in the next class, 30 minutes in the next class. And then you send them home with 2 hours worth of homework. The brain has been absolutely overloaded. You're actually damaging the child's brain. What that ends up meaning is that the kid has a loss of pleasure in everyday life. Then they start trying to find pleasure in big things. Risk-taking, risky sexual activity. There's a huge increase in self-mutilation in my caseload. So you'll see that any big thing that can now get a burst of dopamine, because the small things are not cutting it anymore. The only way that you can get that back then is to pretty much detox from technology. And for kids that have too much technology, if the school is demanding that they are spending hours in front of a screen, you're basically keeping the child from being able to get healthy. That is a moral problem. So you have academic problems and you have moral problems with this. And if you don't think very deeply and very critically about the possible problems with this, well, you should. As a mom, one of my biggest problems is the EMGs, the electromagnetic radiation, the EMRs that come from these things. The CDC is trying to figure out at what level they think that this is a possible versus a probable carcinogen. But we know that there is radiation that comes off of these. We know that our kids are less developed, that their skulls are less thick. So this is why we don't want to have a cell phone up against our kids' skulls. But an iPad, it's bigger. There's more surface area. There's more EMRs that are coming off of that and hitting our kids. Right at this reproductive area, right at the gut. If it's touching them, it's obviously worse. But my concern as a mom is, you're going to put one of these devices in front of my child for how long, how many hours a day, for how many years, and then find out later that this impacts tumor growth and all kinds of problems like that, then that's a huge moral issue as well. So I just want you guys to know that if you're going to use technology, is it really needed? Is this the lesson that you really need to use and augment technology for? Then fine. Is it for a small period of time? Less than 30 minutes, less than 20 minutes is better before you take what we call an analog break. Don't put books on there on the iPad if you can actually read a book. Have as many analog breaks as possible. And the biggest thing is moderation. Know how it impacts the brain. Know that it's an important thing that you're doing when you're using the technology, and know that it's okay not to. The district is going to spend millions of dollars on this. And so some people have a pretty vested interest I don't have some conspiracy theory because I don't know any of your people. But anytime people drop millions of dollars, somebody's pretty passionate about that. That means that you're probably going to get messages that says, please use this, please use this, please use this. We spent a lot of money on it. So I need you to understand, do I really need to use it? How much do I really need to use it? And be sure that you know exactly why.